Hi, everybody. This is Denise Tawwab. Back with you today to continue the series on system and common control authorizations. This is part 2. So if you haven't looked at the first video, you might want to check that out. Today, we're going to talk about continuous monitoring and ongoing authorization and how the two impact each other. We'll also talk a bit about how to transition from static authorizations to ongoing authorizations. We'll look at reauthorizations and some of the events that can trigger reauthorizations. So this should not be a long video, but let's get started. Again, what we'll cover: ongoing authorization, continuous monitoring, reauthorization, event-driven triggers, and significant changes. Ongoing authorization, continuous monitoring strategies promote effective and efficient risk management on an ongoing basis. So that's how you get into ongoing authorization. You're doing continuous monitoring, and so you know the security and privacy state of your system at all times. Risk management can become near real time by using automation and state-of-the-art practices, techniques, and tools for ongoing monitoring. And that's to controls and to any changes in your system and in the environment of operation. Continuing monitoring to be effective and to support ongoing authorization has to be done based on the needs of the authorizing official. And when it's done that way, it produces the information that's necessary for the AO to determine the current security and privacy posture of the system or of the common controls. Continuous monitoring also highlights the risk to your operations, assets, individuals, other organizations, and the nation, and it guides and informs the AO's decision as to whether to continue to authorize operation of the system or the continued use of the common controls that have been inherited by the systems. Continuous monitoring again helps to achieve ongoing authorization, where the AO maintains sufficient knowledge. Now, this is from NIST Special Publication 837 Revision 2. And one characteristic of NIST publications is that they do a lot of repetition, and I think that's just to reinforce the information. And some of what's happening in this publication is that it is a draft publication, so this is not the final version. But so when you hear me repeating things, it's not that I'm not aware that I'm repeating. I'm just making the attempt to follow the publication as closely as possible so that if you're listening to this in lieu of reading the publication or after reading the publication, it sort of matches. So hang in there with me. Okay. Continuous monitoring, again, allows us to determine whether to continue to operate a system. And if not, if the answer to that question is no, then continuous monitoring will tell us, okay, which step in the risk management framework do I need to go back and revisit so that I can effectively respond to whatever this additional level of risk to security and privacy happens to be. All right, let's talk about reauthorizations. Reauthorizations are not necessary in situations where the continuous monitoring program gives the AO the information that's necessary to manage risk from changes to the system or to the environments of operation. If a reauthorization is required, then you're going to maximize the use of your status reports and any relevant information that you can pull from your automated systems about the security and privacy posture of the system. And this allows you to do things more efficiently than, again, if you're not using automation and continuous monitoring. When a system or common controls are under ongoing authorizations, then the system or common controls may be authorized on a time-driven or an event-driven basis. And in both cases, they're going to leverage information, security and privacy related information that comes from the continuous monitoring program. The system and common controls are authorized on a time-driven basis in accordance with the authorization frequency that was determined by your organization as part of your continuous monitoring strategy. The system and the common controls are authorized on an event-driven basis when organizational defined trigger events occur. And we'll talk about trigger events a bit later. Whether the organization is time-driven or event-driven, the AO acknowledges the ongoing acceptance of any identified risk. The organization determines the level of formality that you'll put in place for acknowledging this risk by the AO. But the risk is continuously monitored and is continuously authorized. All right, system and organizational conditions for implementing ongoing authorization. How do we get there? Well, when the risk management framework has been effectively applied across the organization and you've implemented a robust continuous monitoring program, which most of us have not, but some of us are working on it, systems can transition from a static point in time authorization process to a dynamic, near real time ongoing authorization process. And to transition to ongoing authorization, you've got to have the following two conditions met. The system or the common controls that are being considered for ongoing authorization have to have received an initial authority to operate based on a complete zero-based review of the system or of the common controls. So there has to already be an initial authorization to operate. And then the organizational continuous monitoring program must be in place that monitors the implemented controls with the appropriate degree of rigor and at the required frequencies. And both of those things will be specified by your organization in keeping with your continuous monitoring strategies and any NIST standards and guidelines that you're subject to. Your company is going to establish and implement a progress to designate that those two conditions are satisfied and that the system or common controls are transitioning to ongoing authorization. And this includes the authorizing official acknowledging that the system or common controls are now being managed by an ongoing authorization process and accepting the responsibility for performing any activities associated with that process. The authorizing official has to do that. The transition to ongoing authorization is going to be documented by the AO by issuing a new authorization decision. So prior to transitioning to ongoing authorization, your business you have authorization decision documents that include an authorization termination date. You may remember that from the earlier presentation. By requiring a new authorization decision date, it is made clear that the system in question or the common controls are no longer bound to the termination date specified in the initial authorization document because the system and the common controls are now under ongoing authorization. So the security and privacy related information that's generated by the continuing monitoring process is then given to the AO and to other organizational officials in a timely manner through security and privacy management and reporting tools. And these tools facilitate risk-based decision-making for the ongoing authorization for both systems and for common controls. All right, information generation and collection requirements. To support ongoing authorization, security and privacy related information for controls is generated and collected at a predetermined frequency based on the organization's continuous monitoring strategy. And this information can be collected either using automated tools or other methods of assessment, depending on the type and purpose of the control and the desired degree of rigor of the assessment. So some automated tools may not generate security and privacy related information that is sufficient to support the authorizing official in making risk determinations. And this can happen for a number of reasons, including the tools don't generate information for every control or every part of a control. It could be that additional assurance is needed by the AO, or it could be that the tools do not generate information on specific technologies or platforms. And this definitely comes into place when you're looking at legacy systems. When automated tools fail to give you the necessary information, then you fall back to manual control assessments. And these are conducted at predetermined frequencies to cover any gaps in what the automated security and privacy related information will give you. The manually generated assessment results are then provided to the AO in a manner deemed appropriate by the organization. So you decide how that manual information is given to the AO, but you do have to supplement your automated information with some manual information because there are controls that cannot be automated. To support ongoing authorizations for moderate impact and high impact systems, and this is relevant for federal organizations for sure. The security and privacy related information provided to the AO, whether you get it manually or automatically, is produced and analyzed by an independent entity established by the organization. So in moderate and high impact systems, you can't do self-assessments. You have to have those controls authorized by an independent authority. The senior agency official for privacy is responsible for assessing the privacy controls and providing privacy related information to the authorizing official. At the discretion of your business, privacy controls may also be assessed by an independent assessor. The independent assessor is impartial and free from any perceived or actual conflicts of interest regarding the development, implementation, assessment, operation, or management of the systems and the common controls that are being monitored. So there is an independence requirement when you're working with moderate and high impact systems in the federal government. All right, ongoing authorization frequency. Special Publication 853, which is our control catalog. It has a control CA6. Part C specifies that the authorization for a system and any common controls that are inherited by the system must be updated at an organization established frequency. This reinforces, again, the concept of ongoing authorization. So in keeping with that control, your organization will determine a frequency with which the AO is going to review security and privacy related information via the security or privacy management and reporting tool or via manual processes, whichever works for your business. This near real-time information, again, is used to determine whether the mission or business risk of operating the system or of providing the common controls continues to be acceptable. NIST 800-137 will give you criteria for determining assessment and monitoring frequencies. So again, NIST doesn't leave you out there. It does give you some guidance. So take a look at 800-137. Okay, now we're going to talk about triggers, time-driven triggers that impact ongoing authorization frequency. Under ongoing authorization, time-driven authorization triggers refer to the frequency with which the organization determines that authorizing officials are to review security and privacy-related information and authorize the system or common controls for continued operation. Time-driven triggers can be based on a number of factors, including the impact level of the system. When a time-driven trigger occurs, the authorizing official reviews security and privacy-related information on the systems for which they're responsible and accountable to determine, one, the ongoing organizational mission and business risk, two, the acceptability of such risk in keeping with the organization's risk tolerance, and three, whether the approval for continued operation is justified. The organizational continuous monitoring process, supported by security and privacy management tools, provides the appropriate functionality to notify the responsible and accountable AO that it's time to review the security and privacy related information to support ongoing authorization. Okay, event triggers that impact ongoing authorization frequency. Event-driven authorization triggers necessitate an immediate review of the system, of the security and privacy related information by the AO. Organizations may define some event-driven triggers for ongoing authorization and reauthorization. So when an event-driven trigger occurs under ongoing authorization, the AO is either notified by personnel or via an automated tool that a defined trigger event has happened, and an immediate review of the system or the common controls in question is required. The AO may also determine independently and at any time that an immediate review is required. Anytime the security or privacy risk escalates above the risk tolerance, whatever event, whatever happens to cause that, the AO at his or her discretion can determine that an immediate review is required. This review is going to be conducted in addition to the time-driven frequency review that's defined in your continuous monitoring strategy. And it occurs during ongoing authorization when the residual risk remains within acceptable limits of the organization's risk tolerance. Okay, let's talk about transitioning from static authorization to ongoing authorization. How do we begin to get there? The intent of continuous monitoring is to monitor your controls at a frequency that's sufficient to give the AO sufficient and necessary information to make effective risk-based decisions, whether this is automated or manual. However, if a substantial portion of monitoring is not automated, it is not going to be feasible or practical to move from the current static authorization approach to the more efficient and effective ongoing authorization process. A phased approach for the generation of security and privacy related information might be necessary during the transition as more automated tools become available and a greater number of controls are monitored by automated techniques. So your ongoing authorization is really going to be driven by how much automation you have looking at your systems. Organizations may begin by generating security and privacy related information from automated tools and then fill in gaps by generating additional information manually. And as the additional automated monitoring functionality is added, the processes can be adjusted. So as you add automation, then you can get rid of your manual processes. Transitioning from a static authorization process to a dynamic ongoing authorization process is going to take considerable thought and preparation. One method, let's talk about two different phased approaches. One method is to take a phased approach based on the security categorization of the system. So think about this, because risk tolerant levels for low impact systems are likely going to be greater than for moderate or high impact systems, then you implement your continuous monitoring and ongoing authorization for the low impact systems first. And this will help ease the transition because it allows your organization to incorporate any lessons learned. So you're playing around with a low impact system. If you make mistakes, it's low impact. And then you get to incorporate those lessons learned into your implementations for your moderate and high impact systems. This will facilitate the consistent progression of the continuous monitoring and ongoing authorization implementation from the lowest to the highest impact levels for the systems in your organization. The second phased approach is this. You can employ the phased implementation approach by partitioning your systems into well-defined subsystems or system components. And then you transition those subsystems or system components to ongoing authorization, one segment at a time until the entire system is ready for the full transition. Once all the subsystems and system components have been transitioned, then the authorizing official acknowledges that the system is now being managed by an ongoing authorization process. So that's two different approaches, by system security categorization or by partitioning systems. Okay, next up, we're going to talk about reauthorization. Reauthorization is going to happen at the discretion of the AO in accordance with federal or your business policy. Decisions to initiate a formal reauthorization include inputs from the senior agency information security officer, senior agency official for privacy, and the senior accountable official for risk management, also known as the risk executive function. If a reauthorization action is required, then you're going to want to maximize the use of security and privacy risk related information produced as part of the continuous monitoring process. Reauthorization actions, again, can be either time driven or event driven. Time driven authorizations occur when the authorization termination date is reached if one is specified in the authority to operate. If the system is under ongoing authorization, a time-driven reauthorization may not be necessary. An ongoing authorization approach requires that a continuous monitoring program is in place to monitor all implemented controls with the frequency specified in your continuous monitoring strategy. If the continuous monitoring program is not yet ready to fully support ongoing authorization, then a maximum authorization period can be specified by the AO. Authorization termination dates are going to be influenced by federal and organizational policies and by the requirements of your AO. Under ongoing authorization, if an event occurs that produces risk above the organizational acceptable risk tolerance, then a reauthorization might be necessary. For example, if there is a breach or incident or failure of or significant problems with the continuous monitoring program, you may need to do a reauthorization. Reauthorization actions may necessitate a review of and changes to your continuous monitoring strategy. If the reauthorization results in changes to your strategy, then ongoing authorization might be impacted. So there's a lot of moving parts that you have to consider with ongoing authorization and how reauthorizations are impacted under a continuous monitoring strategy. All right, reauthorization and security control assessments. For security and privacy assessments that are associated with reauthorization, then what you want to do is leverage information that's generated by your continuous monitoring program and then fill in any gaps with manual assessments. You may supplement automatically generated assessment information with manually generated information in situations where you need an increased level of assurance. Security control assessment results can be cumulatively applied to the reauthorization if the assessments are conducted by qualified assessors with the necessary independence. So that's an independent assessor. If the assessments use appropriate security standards and guidelines, and if the assessments are based on the needs of the authorizing official. NIST 853 is going to talk about specific conditions when security related information can be reused to support authorization actions. Okay, privacy control assessments and reauthorization. The senior agency official for privacy is the one responsible for assessing privacy controls. Privacy control assessment results can be cumulatively applied to the reauthorization. Independent assessors may assess privacy controls at the discretion of the organization. The senior agency official for privacy reviews and approves the authorization packages for information systems that process personally identifiable information before the AO makes a reauthorization decision. The reauthorization action may be as simple as updating the security and privacy plan, security privacy assessment reports, and the plans of action and milestones focused only on specific problems or ongoing issues, or the reauthorization action, depending on what has happened, may be as comprehensive as the initial authorization. Again, it depends on what has happened to the system and or the environment of operation. The AO signs an updated authorization decision document based on the current risk determination and the acceptance of risk. That's what happens with the reauthorization. In all situations where there's a decision to reauthorize a system or some common controls inherited by organizational systems, then the maximum reuse of authorization information is encouraged to minimize the time and expense of the reauthorization effort. And of course, this will be subject to your own organization's reuse policy. And so this is what we've covered, ongoing authorization, reauthorization. And now we're going to get into event-driven triggers and significant changes. Triggers are indicators or prompts that cause a predefined organizational reaction. Organizations define their event-driven triggers for both ongoing authorization and for reauthorization. Event-driven triggers can include, but certainly are not limited to, things like new threat, vulnerability, privacy risk, or impact information, an increased number of deficiencies from the continuous monitoring program, new mission business requirements, a change in the authorizing official, some significant change in risk assessment findings, significant changes to the system, the common controls, or the environments of operation, and when you exceed organizational thresholds, such as the risk tolerance threshold. So, what happens when the authorizing official changes? The new AO reviews the current authorization decision document, looks at the authorization package and any updated documents from ongoing monitoring activities or a report from the automated management and reporting tools. And if the new AO finds the current risk to be acceptable, the new AO signs a new or updated authorization decision document, formally transferring responsibility and accountability for the system or the common controls. In doing so, the new authorizing official explicitly accepts the risk. If the new AO finds the current risk to be unacceptable, then an authorization action can be initiated. And that, of course, is ongoing authorization or reauthorization. Alternatively, the new AO can set new terms and conditions for continuing the original authorization, but not extend the original authorization termination date if it's not under ongoing authorization. Does that make sense? When you change AOs for a system, something happens. It's a formal process where the new AO does his or her own reauthorization based on the information that's there, the reauthorization package, and what's happening with the continuous monitoring system to make a decision about, okay, as the new AO, do I authorize this system to continue to operate? So, significant changes can also trigger reauthorizations. A significant change is defined as a change that is likely to substantively affect the security or privacy posture of a system. Significant changes can include installing a new or upgraded operating system, middleware components or applications, modifications to system ports, protocols, or services, installing new or upgraded hardware, modifications to how information, especially PII, is processed, modifications to your crypto modules or services, or modifications to security and privacy controls. Those are all considered significant changes. Significant changes to the environment of operation can trigger event driven authorization actions too. And this includes when you move to a new facility, when you add new core mission or business functions, acquiring specific and credible threat information that the organization itself is being targeted by a threat source, or new or modified laws, directives, policies, or regulations. GDPR comes immediately to mind. So, what constitutes significant change? Changes are only significant when they represent a change that is likely to impact the security and privacy posture of the system. Organizations establish criteria for what constitutes significant change based on a number of factors, including your mission and business needs, your threat and vulnerability information, your environments of operation for the systems, privacy risk, and security categorization. So that will impact what your organization considers to be a significant change. Risk assessment or impact analysis results may be used to determine if changes to systems or to common controls are significant and trigger authorization actions. If an authorization action is initiated, then the organization targets only the specific controls affected by the changes and reuses previous assessment results wherever possible. An effective monitoring program can significantly reduce the overall cost and level of effort of authorization actions. Most changes to a system or its environment of operation can be handled through the continuous monitoring program and ongoing authorization. And I think we're done. Yep, we covered ongoing authorization, continuous monitoring, reauthorization, event driven triggers, and significant changes. And I want to refer you back to the 5 core documents for federal risk management. NIST 839, Managing Information Security Risk. 830 is your guide for risk assessments. 37 is the Risk Management Framework, and that's the document we're working in for this video. Recommended security controls, that's 853, your security control catalog, and 853A, which is your guide for assessing the security controls in federal systems and organizations. Again, I thank you for your time. I ask that you like, rate, subscribe, that you also, if you have any questions or comments, please ask them in the comment section, and I will be watching that and I will respond as quickly as possible. I hope that you have a really good rest of the day.